Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of USA Global TV and Radio. The content presented is for informational purposes only and is intended to foster open discussion and debate. Viewer discretion is advised. USA Global TV and Radio does not endorse any particular viewpoint and encourages viewers to seek out additional information and perspectives. Saving America with Dr. David D. Schein.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. Hey, it's been another wall-to-wall week. Hostages returned, but what about Hamas? I joined most of the world in celebrating the return of the remaining 20 living hostages. However, Hamas is now policing the streets of Gaza as the IDF has moved back out of central Gaza per the agreement. I believe we are now in phase 2 of this peace deal, and it's not looking good. As I predicted in my prior pieces, I believe the Israelis will have to still go in and remove the Hamas crew in order to both restore Gaza to some semblance of habitability and to have peace in the Middle East. What we know is that Hamas rolled over on the hostages since they knew that Israel had the full backing of the USA, and that meant their gig was over, at least as far as the hostages. What I still do not understand is why anyone would protest in favor of Hamas. These are bloodthirsty terrorists. Remember, these murderers and rapists tortured their victims who were peaceably attending a music festival on October 7th, 2023. They attacked on that date, not the other way around, and like most bullies, they are cowards. Not only did they go after civilians, but they then hid behind other Gazans when the Israelis tried to come and get their hostages. As if anyone needed more proof, the latest is that Hamas has not surrendered arms and just executed 8 people in cold blood. This was apparently since they were calling for the administration of Gaza that was not Hamas. I have no respect for anyone who takes their side, period. As a side note, a dissident in Venezuela won the Nobel Peace Prize for 2025. I take nothing away from her, and interestingly, she saluted President Trump. The prize, like virtually every major award, has been tainted by politics. Recall that all Obama had to do was to get elected, and he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. I stopped paying attention to the Oscars and the other beauty shows awards decades ago. I do believe if Trump pulls off the ultimate and resolves the Russian invasion of Ukraine, he will win next year. But again, the recognition of peace through strength is the real victory here. CCP threats of civilization, more evidence. The CCP has tried to implement a series of economic sanctions against the USA recently. This is a poor strategy since they need us a lot more than we need them. I've tried for as long as I've been on the air to discourage any type of trade with China. That is where Trump and I disagree. The headline for their latest effort is the CCP's limitation on export of critical rare earth minerals. Well, first, similar to the chip and pharmaceuticals crisis during the COVID shutdown, the leaders in the world economy stupidly got themselves into this mess. I applaud Trump's efforts to get computer chips and big pharma back into the USA. Note that this helps most of the world, not just us. Second, turning back to rare earth minerals, we have plenty in the ground. However, in terms of active supply, the CCP may control as much as 90%. They are used in the manufacture of computer chips and other in-demand products today. The Biden-Harris administration foolishly blocked development of domestic production. I blame both political parties for not attending to America's needs. Instead, the Pauls pad their own pockets with insider trading and slush funds. Third, one positive headline is that Trump has now authorized what is labeled a mega mine in Alaska. This reversed the idiotic Biden-Harris administration's blocking development of such resources. This cannot happen fast enough. The academic community may finally be waking up to the threat from the CCP. However, it is hard to wean themselves off the payola. I have previously reported on so-called Confucius Institutes on many college campuses. They provided so-called faculty and resources. These really functioned as CCP spy centers and to spread false propaganda. As more evidence accumulated about the dangers of these institutes, many have been closed. Of course, the CCP is shameless and still pursues other avenues to influence both academia and American society. In addition, a recent report is that 7 universities have now cut ties with a CCT program that can lead to transfer of sensitive and valuable technology being stolen by the CCP. A congressional committee announced that Dartmouth College, Temple University, UC Davis, UC Irvine, UC Riverside, Notre Dame, and the University of Tennessee have ended their joint programs with the Chinese Scholarship Council. That's right, sounds nice and innocent, doesn't it, folks? The deal was that the CCP would send over scholarship students in these sensitive areas, but required them to return to China for at least 2 years thereafter, obviously to make sure the CCP got the latest technology that Americans could produce. Cartels and a war against Americans. It has not made a lot of sense to me with so many people protesting during normal working hours. They risk getting hurt and getting jailed. The threats against ICE and other government agents are questionable, as these agents serve the will of the majority of the American people. Then there are reports of bounties to kill Border Patrol or ICE agents ranging from $5,000 to $50,000. Who is paying the protesters and why? Well, the cartels have been dealing death with drugs and committing heinous crimes through the trafficking of children and adults. The Trump administration crackdown means the loss of billions of dollars to these cartels. So that they would be the funding source makes a lot of sense. In turn, classifying these cartels as terrorists and eliminating them is a necessary step. They can choose to use their barrels of money and live good somewhere, or choose to be exterminated like Hamas and those Venezuelan drug boats. Just as I have no respect for anyone protesting for Hamas, I have no use for anyone who opposes the work of ICE and other government agents to clean up our communities. One recent report, which is not getting enough headlines, is that a combined federal and state task force went after trafficking of children in the greater San Antonio, Texas area. That's about 3.5 hours from our studios here in Houston. The effort rescued more than 30 missing children. The operation was called Operation Lightning Bug. Pair this with the tragic reports of heinous crimes being committed by those who've been arrested numerous times. From California, an illegal who was deported 7 times previously killed 6 people in a drunk driving collision. He had an ICE detainer on him, which the authorities in California ignored. Similar stories include an ICE immigration detainer on an illegal who repeatedly raped an 11-year-old girl. I have a grandchild who's 11, so this hits home for me. This type of horror should not be happening anywhere in the world, much less in America. Layoffs related to the government shutdown. The Chucky shutdown has brought about just the desserts for the Democrats. Layoffs of non-essential government employees, almost all of whom are Democrats. One agency that was closed was the Community Financial Institutions Fund. Reports in the conservative media are that this little-known agency was granting awards of our hard-earned tax dollars based on race and other left-wing priorities. An article in the Daily Caller identified millions going to suspect operations. Most American taxpayers would scream with anger if they knew about these likely illegal handouts. Dominion Voting Systems changes hands. Combining business and politics, Dominion Voting Systems, which was a focus of Republican complaints following the 2020 presidential election, was purchased by an election reform advocate and has been renamed Liberty Vote. This was based on an article from the Daily Wire. The new owner promises positive election procedures going forward. Of course, Dominion was in the news over the last few years as certain allegations related to their machines were not supported and it achieved large settlements. My own take is that it's not the machines as much as those who are operating the machines. I call for much more federal supervision of federal elections and, if required, FBI intervention to make sure elections are run properly. Speaking of wasting taxpayer money, a recent Washington Free Beacon headline reads, "The United States has spent $110 billion on AIDS prevention. Less than half the money went to medical supplies and health workers," a State Department audit found. That's just the headline, folks. This is a stunning amount of money. I want to volunteer that I counseled employers through the AIDS crisis of the late 1980s into the 1990s. I'm happy to see that medical progress has been made. One of my former clients told me that he was diagnosed as HIV positive, but due to new medications, he was so clear of the virus that he could pass a blood test as not being positive. In any event, the article by Adam Credo points out the enormous waste, even in programs that are intended to do good. The point being that there is plenty of room to cut and achieve efficiencies in these government programs. And for my money, time to let state and local governments decide how to spend the money in their own communities. We taxpayers send tons of monies to Washington. Most of it is scraped off by the massive and inefficient bureaucracy and then doled out to the states like the feds are Santa Claus. Let's end that. I note that a former Saving America guest, Simon Hankinson, an expert at the Heritage Foundation, is quoted in the article. He references agencies with far left agendas that are being richly supported by your hard-earned tax dollars. There are plenty of other details in that article, and I refer you to that if you'd like to see more of the gory details of the waste of your tax dollars. Half-price books closing stores while Barnes & Noble is hanging in there. Dickens' famous novel was The Tale of Two Cities. Well, this is the tale of two booksellers. Barnes & Noble is the dominant force remaining in bricks and mortar bookstores. I thought sales were sliding toward ebooks and audiobooks, but no, hard copy sales are still rolling. A quick check indicated that B&N was founded in 1894 and has grown to 29,000 employees. B&N will open 60 new stores during 2025. Not So Rosy is a place that I used to patronize, Half Price Books, which has been around for 52 years. In fact, for many years, there was a location here in Houston that was not far from me. That location has been gone for a while now. The latest report from Half Price Books is they are closing locations in Texas and California. I find this interesting since with inflation and things, I would think that readers would be looking for bargains in books. The rub here is that the retail space is expensive, and as their leases expire, these stores cannot afford the increases in rents in certain markets. All 16 employees dead after a massive explosion at a factory in Tennessee. This happened at the 45-year-old Accurate Energetic Systems plant in rural Tennessee. I extend my sympathy to the families of the victims. I note that this type of tragedy is rare since the more dangerous of a production facility, the more there is an emphasis on safety. My own experience was in oil and chemical refineries. While they can be dangerous, they are some of the safest workplaces due to comprehensive and persistent focus on safety. I will later report on the cause of the large loss of life here. Due to the concern for safety, just entering the area where the entire building is destroyed and the embers are still burning is hazardous. This is an old story, but one that I really like. In 1974, a ship with 277 passengers caught fire and sunk in the oceans near Philippines. A woman named Candelaria Venezuela was one of the passengers. She clung to a sea turtle that swam up under her as she tried to survive in the water. The report is that she hung on for 2 days. When she was finally rescued by a Navy ship, the rescuers thought she was clinging to an oil barrel. However, the turtle pulled away and circled twice after she grabbed the life preserver.
All rise.
Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. Once you hear from our next guest, I am sure that you will agree that she deserves a moniker of interesting person. Saving America welcomes Dr. Jennifer Smith, who is a subject matter expert in virology and immunology. After receiving her master's degree from the University of Georgia, she took a position in cutting-edge research laboratory with world-renowned virologist Dr. Robert Webster at St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. There she managed an animal biosafety level 3 containment lab while studying influenza viruses. Her efforts and those of her team were rewarded by development of an effective poultry vaccine, as well as a vaccine to be stockpiled for use in immunizing humans against this lethal strain of the virus. She continued to work with Dr. Webster while she earned her PhD. Dr. Smith then joined NIAID's Center of Excellence for Influenza Research and Surveillance at the University of Georgia in a collaborative project with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. We know that as CDC. She assessed methods for improving delivery of vaccines for mass vaccination campaigns. In 2016, she transitioned from research science to public health, taking a position as an epidemiological specialist in the Disease Outbreak Control Division at the Hawaii Department of Health. She conducted disease investigations of communicable diseases of key public health interest. She was also instrumental in the COVID-19 pandemic response effort by identifying and investigating cases and contact tracing. Her experience led her to write the book, Pandemic in Paradise, an insider's view of COVID corruption in Hawaii. We had to shorten her bio so we would have time for the interview. We welcome Dr. Jennifer Smith for her first appearance on Saving America. It's, as you know, Dr. Smith, we asked 3 questions to give our audience a good flavor for the kind of work that you've been doing. I found your Brownstone article, Safe and Effective is Not Rooted in Science, fascinating. Let's start by discussing the word safe as it applies to the type of stuff we're working on.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Schein, for having me on today. I appreciate your giving me this opportunity to talk about my recent work. So, we've all heard this marketing slogan, safe and effective, safe and effective. This mantra has been pounded into us over the last 5 years, but safe is really not scientific. So, the word safe can mean different things to different people. So the real thing that we should be talking about when it comes to vaccines is toxicity. So we know that all vaccines carry some risk, and toxicity is not binary. So it's not toxic or non-toxic. Toxicity is on a spectrum. So we really should be trying to determine how toxic they are and for whom.
Well, that's a fascinating situation, and I think one of the reasons we get into this debate, isn't it, because some people will go and get a vaccine and be really sick, and yet these vaccines are designed that the majority of people get the benefit and don't get sick, right?
Well, a true vaccine, the purpose of a true vaccine would be to induce an immune response or protect us from infection. So a true vaccine is meant to be a preventative. It's meant to prevent us from getting infected. Now, unfortunately, as I've dived more into this topic, I've learned that most vaccines that are out now are actually not preventives. They do not protect us from infection. So most vaccines that are on the market now, for example, the flu shot, is meant to decrease the length and severity of disease.
Oh, interesting, because it's, I am a big flu shot person. I get one every fall, as a college professor. I'm exposed to an awful lot of people, literally hundreds. I also am a very business networking person. I go to a lot of business meetings and things. And just statistically, your option or your alternatives in terms of being exposed are fairly high. So I have been trained to get my flu shot usually the first week in September, last week in August. And I know that's a little early, and I'm now hearing the latest we're hearing is, well, you should get your flu shot in October because then you're closer to the flu season, so the immunization response doesn't run out before the flu season ends. But I'm tending to think that the difference between the end of August and October is not going to be great, right?
Well, actually, some of my recent work shows that getting a flu shot every year might not actually be necessary. So there is a lot of work that's being published now that shows that if you were vaccinated last year and get the vaccine this year, it actually may dampen your immunity to flu, and you might be more likely to get infected. So getting a flu shot every year may not be helpful. It may be actually more damaging in terms of your protection. So that's a very interesting question that I've always wondered, is why are we getting a flu shot for the 2009 H1N1 pandemic strain since 2010? by now everyone's has immunity to that strain. So why are we continuing to vaccinate people for the same flu strain year after year?
Oh, that's an awfully a good question. And it's interesting because I've also had the RSV shot, which they didn't tell me when they gave it to me. One of the many problems you run into is that if you go to your local Kroger pharmacy or someplace like that where they're not medical specialists, they don't tell you things like on the RSV shot, I found out it's supposed to be every other year, which may tie in with what you just said. It's not designed to be every year. So I just had my second, which is 2 years later than the first one when I got my flu shot. And they also don't tell you which shots to get together and things like that. Seems that we could be better organized.
Right. So in fact, there's actually probably no studies that show that you can get these vaccines simultaneously. So when they were telling people initially, when say for instance, the COVID mRNA shots came out, they said not to get them at the same time as any other vaccines. And then suddenly they changed their mind and said, yeah, sure, it's okay to go ahead and get them. So it's usually just for convenience sake, but there are actually no studies that have been done to show that that is actually beneficial. And it actually may put you at risk, more risks for adverse events when you multiply the injections that you're getting.
Fascinating situation. A key part of your article discusses toxicity. Would you share with our audience the key concerns you have about toxicity analysis of the many drugs and injections that many of us take today, including what I just mentioned?
Right. So we know that any substance that we inject, inhale, or ingest can be toxic. In fact, even water can be toxic, based on dose. So, we have people who can actually overdose on water. So the fact that they say that vaccines are totally safe it's inaccurate and it's misleading. What we really need to do is look at the ingredients. What are we injecting? So the first thing I break down in terms of this proposed vaccine toxicity index is looking at the ingredients of a vaccine, because that's going to be where most of the toxicity is going to come from. So we know that there's 26 different vaccines that contain formalin, which is a known carcinogen. There are 24 vaccines that contain aluminum, which is a known neurotoxin. So it's really important, first and foremost, to know the ingredients in the vaccine that you're going to be getting.
Are both of those chemicals that you just mentioned preservatives?
No. So formalin is used to inactivate viruses. That means that makes them no longer able to replicate. And then the aluminum is known to be an adjuvant, which means that is helpful in stimulating or inducing an inflammatory response to help induce the immune response you want to the antigen that's in the vaccine.
Interesting, because I'm allergic to thimerosal, which is the very common preservative. And I found out in an interesting way, for many years I wore contact lenses. And when I first got them, the eye drops were preserved with thimerosal. And I was very allergic to it. And so today, when I get my flu shot, I get the refrigerated flu shot, which is not preserved, because the traditional flu shot that's shelf stable is shelf stable with thimerosal, which I understand the current Department of Health and Human Services is talking about banning, because apparently a lot of us are allergic to it. It's not a good substance. I think it's mercury based.
Yes, so it's actually methylmercury, which is toxic. It can cross the blood-brain barrier and become a neurotoxin. Actually, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the current secretary of HHS, just removed thimerosal from all. So thimerosal, the only vaccines that contained thimerosal at this point were flu shots. So multi-dose vials of influenza vaccine. So that has now been removed. So all flu vaccines now should be single dose flu shots and should not contain any thimerosal.
Thank you for giving us that better pronunciation. Obviously, I'm not a pro in your area. What's your scientific recommendation for resolving the safety versus toxicity issue? How would this be applied to vaccines being distributed in the future? In other words, are we looking at and maybe with the help of the current HHS secretary, trying to be safer in a safer way, if you know what I mean.
Right. So what I'm proposing is a vaccine toxicity index. So scoring vaccines based on different categories, different criteria, and I break that down in my article. So again, looking at the ingredients, what ingredients do they contain? Do vaccines contain aluminum? Are they developed and produced using aborted fetal cell lines? So looking at that, I would propose scoring this. So as I worked in public health, we used to do foodborne illness outbreak investigations. And the first thing that we would do would we send out the food safety branch to look at restaurants and investigate or inspect restaurants. And they would score the restaurants based on certain categories to look for deviations from safe food handling. So I thought, well, why not base vaccine safety on a scoring system similar to that? So we would score each vaccine based on these different criteria. And again, it's just a proposed framework. So, I'd be open to any input that people would have in terms of what criteria we would use. Again, just looking at which vaccines would be more toxic, and then for which groups would they be more at risk for toxic events.
Well, it is an interesting subject, and of course we already touched on one of the pivotal issues, which is well, you've mentioned two. One is, do we really need to do these annually, like they pushing? I mean, my health insurance carrier sends me a reminder. My university is giving flu shots out on campus for free in a couple weeks. And this is a big societal push, especially for people that are very visible out in the urban landscape, as I am here in Houston, Texas. And yet it doesn't sound like we've done a lot of good research on what to do together. Like my debate is, my current personal debate is whether to get another COVID-19 booster. Go ahead, tell us what you think.
No, I
Okay.
do not recommend anyone get any more of those. So it's actually an interesting discussion I've had with people, because the problem with the mRNA injections, it's not a vaccine. So it's not preventing infection or transmission of anything. So what we're doing is actually skewing the immune system. Unfortunately, we're skewing the immune system not only to one single viral protein, but we're also skewing the immune system towards tolerance, which is very problematic. So what does that mean? That means that your body, after the third shot, usually will produce more IgG4, which means that now when you encounter the spike protein, your body's no longer going to see it as dangerous and will no longer respond in a natural way. So that may be helpful, because we know that COVID, the disease, is actually immune dysregulation. So dampening the immune response at this point may actually be helpful. So the only conundrum that we have now is because they want to pull these mRNA injections off the shelf, which I think is very important and should have been done a long time ago. But at the same time, they're not offering anything to fill the gap. So yes, we need a therapeutic. We need therapeutics and treatments to fill the gap for the space that they're taking this mRNA injections away. So again, like I said before, most of these injections are just meant to decrease the length and severity of disease. But what we should really be looking at is effective antiviral therapies.
Well, it sounds like you're on the right track, and we appreciate your getting out there and letting people know, and especially with an article like the one I saw that got me introduced to you through Brownstone Foundation. How can our audience get more information about you and your important work?
So I have a Substack, Smith's Virology blog. You can follow me there, join, support my work if you feel led. I also have a website, smithsvirologist.com. You can look up my background and education and experience there, as well as all of my interviews and podcasts and radio interviews are listed there as well.
Fantastic.
Please proceed.
Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. Our series Interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. Once you hear from our next guest, I'm sure you will agree that he deserves the moniker of interesting person. Saving America welcomes Joel Gardner. He is the president of the Jefferson Council, a special organization at the University of Virginia. Joel is a graduate of UVA twice with his BA and then his law degree. In full disclosure, I also hold 2 degrees from UVA. While at UVA, he distinguished himself by being part of organizations like Phi Beta Kappa, Z Society, and the Raven Society. After a stint in the Army, he enrolled in law school where he was an editor of the Law Review and a member of the the Order of the Coif, a truly distinguished record. After law school, he initially practiced law with a major Wall Street law firm, then segged into investment banking, where he spent the next 30 years as a corporate finance banker specializing in transactions with the Pacific Basin. However, Joel never truly left the university. He has served on 4 university boards, including being a founding member of the Rotunda Society Board. He's chaired more than a half dozen fundraising efforts, most recently served on the university's Committee on Free Expression and Free Inquiry. He's been a UVA parent twice and is the author of From Rebel Yell to Revolution, which tells the story of the momentous 4 years from 1966 to 1970 while he was an undergrad at UVA. In another interesting parallel, I'm currently working on a book called A Cheap Education about my 4 years in college at a very different school, 1969, 1973. He's traveled around the country giving book talks to numerous UVA alumni clubs. He also published a number of articles dealing with UVA for the James G. Martin Center for Academic Renewal. Joel is actively involved in the creation of the Jefferson Council, served on its first executive committee, and he's now returned as new role as president of the Jefferson Council. Hey, we had to shorten his bio so we'd have time for the interview itself. We welcome Joel Gardner for his first appearance on Saving America.
Thanks, David. Really great to meet you.
Well, we're so looking forward to having you join us today. As you know, we ask our guests 3 broad questions. The first is, of all the universities in America, why would it be important to focus on free speech at the University of Virginia?
Well, UVA is really a unique institution, and we can start off with the fact that it has its 2 founders, not only presidents of the United States and founding fathers, but also authors of 2 of the most revered documents in Western civilization. Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence, and James Madison, the author of the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment. And because of that incredible, unique situation, I think most UVA graduates over the years has looked back to those 2 founders as people to emulate. Current history has reversed some of that, as these 2 incredible minds have been judged by the mores of current society rather than the time they lived. But when Jefferson founded the university, and he was the main founder, it was his child, one of the things he said, at this institution, we will not be afraid to follow the truth wherever it may lead. And that is something that was always part and parcel, I think, of our education at UVA. And the other unique aspects of the university, like its grounds, which they call it instead of the campus.
That's right.
Designed by Jefferson and are the only UNESCO World Heritage Site in North America. Things like that bind us. And UVA has always had a very, very strong feeling of camaraderie amongst its students and a very, very strong cultural bond amongst the students. That cultural bond has been, in my opinion, shredded over the past decade. And we can get into that. But the First Amendment is key. And the Jeffersonian legacy of civil debate is part and parcel of UVA. So I think we are a unique institution, and our legacy is freedom of expression. I don't think there's any other university that can match that.
Absolutely. And so what has happened to free speech on so many university campuses, including UVA? Why is it so critical to turn that around now, to face it right now?
I think it's not difficult to pinpoint it. And it really all comes back to the politicization of our college campuses. I mean, for I think most of the history of higher education, the foremost purpose was education, starting probably more than a decade ago. And it started well before, but it really picked up speed in the mid-2000s and really became the most important part of the academia after around 2010 was indoctrination. And it was indoctrination in a social justice policies and an agenda. And I think people now will put a term on it, and it really was the DEI movement, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I wrote an article about it 3 or 4 years ago. It's been in the press a lot recently. I think I called that out a lot earlier. I wasn't the first one. There's a brilliant article by the former dean of the Yale Law School, Dean Kronman, called The Downsides of Diversity. It was published in the Wall Street Journal. And basically, I mean, there's a lot in there, but one of the major points he made is that DEI, as applied on college campuses, is not an academic ideal, but a political movement. And that's exactly what it was. And what makes it most troublesome is that the concept of DEI is not what those words mean. Diversity,
true, absolutely,
and inclusion. Diversity means diversity of many things, but not the most important diversity, which is diversity of thought.
Yes.
That has been given total short shrift on college campuses. You can read the works of Jonathan Haidt, who is a prior professor at UVA, is now up at NYU. But there was very little diversity of thought amongst in academia, amongst both the administrations and the faculty. Equity means equality of and final, I'd cut for a second, but it's equality of result and not equality of opportunity.
Absolutely.
And inclusion has meant just the opposite. Inclusion has not meant the inclusion of all groups. It's meant the inclusion of certain groups which are deemed to be marginalized and which, in fact, today run the universities both at a faculty, administrative, and student level. But it's not been inclusion, and it's not been inclusivity. And I've seen it very much at UVA, where we had such a close bond, where there was a great community amongst faculty, students, administrators. It really was an amazing place. And now it's divided. It's been fractured, and it's divided by identity groups. And it's broken my heart to see that, because I think, as you kind of detailed in my biography, UVA has been in my heart and soul since I stepped on the grounds in 1966, never truly left it. And it's really terrible to see what's become of the community, the sense of community and camaraderie there.
Well, it's interesting for us in my approach here in Saving America, because we interviewed a fantastic young lady. She happens to be up in a college in Maryland. She's a senior now. She was an intern for the Heritage Society this summer, and I happened across her because she wrote a brilliant article. I had no idea it was written by a college junior. And I interviewed her. She's Asian American, and she was so critical of DEI. She said, I want to be respected for who I am and my accomplishments and my intellectual ability. I don't want to be considered something because I'm Asian or female. And she just gave such a compelling presentation on where DEI has failed, but not just, I think, academia, but our society in general. So anyway, so we've been on this streak for a while, and we've interviewed two different professors on this same subject. We interviewed a professor who was fired from a university in Bakersfield, California, because he spoke out for conservative causes. And before he was fired, by the way, I got a chance to go out and speak on that campus. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then I just interviewed Amy Wax, who you may have crossed her name. And it's so interesting because I'm a Penn alum, and she was incredibly penalized. If she didn't have tenure, she'd be out on the street. But they have done some rather incredible things to her for being critical of DEI while being a professor at Penn. So it is interesting to see how things are going. So our third question is, what is the purpose of the Jefferson Council, and how has its work to date improved the matter of free speech at UVA, and what more needs to be done in this regard?
Okay. Jefferson Council was formed over 3 years ago by a group of alumni who saw what was going on at the university and was very concerned. I think anybody who was focused on life at the university and had an interest, whether you were an alum or a faculty member or a parent, I could see that there was what I would call a free speech suppression. And it wasn't suppression by fiat, it was suppression de facto. And that suppression was, if you did not agree with the agenda that was being propagated virtually on a daily basis on the grounds, you were going to be marginalized and you were going to be attacked on social media, and students were afraid to speak up in class. And just to show that that's, I think, what a lot of us were seeing, but that was in essence, there was not intellectual diversity. There was a fear of people from moderate conservative to more strongly conservative speaking up on the grounds. And the group saw that, as well as attacks on our founder, Thomas Jefferson, who's known as Mr. Jefferson in Charlottesville and on the grounds. But, you know, we all recognize he, like no other human, was a perfect human being, that his contributions, not only to our university, but to our nation and Western civilization, far exceeded, you know, his, what in today's world is considered, you know, and should be considered to be failings in terms of the social contract. But it wasn't in his day. And as I said, you know, his contributions far surpassed that. And he was revered on grounds. And I think a lot of the attacks on the Jeffersonian legacy, not only him as a person, but his, what I've mentioned before, his mandate that the truth be followed, no matter where it may lead. That just wasn't the case anymore. The truth wasn't being followed, the agenda was being followed. And so these alumni got together. We had a number of pillars I mean, free expression and diversity of thought was one, the Jeffersonian legacy was another, the integrity of the Jefferson grounds was another, which is, of course, distinct to UVA. And the fourth was our honor system, which was a revered part of tens of thousands of UVA graduates for over a century, and which was in the process and has continued to be eviscerated to an extent that it's barely recognizable to what it was. But I think if you asked what most students remember from their time at UVA, it was the concept of honor and the importance of being an honorable person, more important than wealth, more important than success, was being a person of honor and integrity. And that was imbued in us back then. And it was not even slowly, it was quickly being frittered away. So that was another one of our mandates. But those were sort of the founding principles. As time went on, we grew in numbers. We've got over 3,000 members today, people concerned about the university. And I think we've played an amazing role in helping to foster intellectual diversity and freedom of speech. And we've done that in a number of ways. First, we brought many speakers, well-known speakers, moderate, conservative speakers on grounds. We had Vice President Pence, we had George Will, we've had academic speakers like Heather McDonald. And I think we brought people to the grounds that never would have been here if it wasn't for us. Secondly, and I think very, very importantly, is we have focused granularly on events on the grounds and have shined the light of day on them and have educated the university community to how freedom of expression and fairness to all students has been abused. And I think that would have gone uncommented on if we hadn't been out there willing to hear from students and faculty members about what was going on. They felt comfortable speaking to us, and we brought that to the public. And I think that's had a lot of consequence. I can tell you the formation of the Free Speech Committee that I served on was very much in response to some of the writings I did to the public. At that time, interestingly, I had also said the university should adopt the Calvin Committee principles on the university not taking institutional views on political and social matters. That was deep-sixed by the powers that be at the time. And now just recently, they suddenly discovered how important that is, not to be commenting on public affairs because they came under quite a lot of scrutiny and bad publicity.
Yes.
But I think perhaps those were two ways in which I think we have fostered trying to have a level playing field for the free expression on grounds, is that we've had the back of individual students, student groups, and faculty, and I think have given them the courage and the comfort for them to come out and speak, knowing we are there to back them up, when before, in many ways, they would have been criticized and in certain ways had, because it's true, had actions taken against them. I mean, there's certain individual students in the stories, I mean, I could go on for the next half hour talking about how individual students have been mistreated in abominable ways by the administration in that regard. And it's important for people to know, because any parent that would learn of some of that stuff, and most alumni that would learn of that, would be horrified. And I think part of the problem is that most alumni are not aware of what is going on. The administration tells its story. They tell a wonderful story. They have multi-million-dollar PR departments behind them. And most people hear certain things that come out in the university official statements and take that as fact and don't understand that what's going on. And just as it happens today, I think it was last night or very recently on the Joe Scarborough show, and he's not a particularly conservative commentator. His daughter goes to UVA. And he came out with a comment saying how terrible that his daughter came home and basically said that if you come out and speak openly against what is the common agenda there, the common adopted thought, that you're marginalized, you're attacked, and as a result, students just basically sit in class and are afraid to speak up. That just came out. You can find that online. But that's the truth, and people don't understand it. It's denied by the administration, because if you believe what they say and the positions they take, you'd never know it. But they talk the talk and they don't walk the walk, which is why an organization like the Jefferson Council is so important, not only to the University of Virginia, it's important to universities across the country. And now there are many, many groups similar to UVA. There's a group called AFSA, which I think now is 26, 27 similar groups to the Jefferson Council around the country, we were one of the founding members, 5 or 6 founding members, and they're around the country. But it is a problem. I mean, this is a definite problem, not only at universities, this is K through 12. If you go,
yes, absolutely.
Their indoctrination has replaced education as the ground stone of education.
And it's killing us, and it's really been so difficult. I'm a university professor, as I think you know, and I have seen a dramatic decline in the quality of our students coming into our colleges, and we have lost the focus in K through 12 of very basic skills is reading, writing, and arithmetic. And I know it sounds so, 18th century to talk about the 3 R's, but I've got a student who's a sophomore in college, supposed to write a paper on philosophy. It came by one of the committees I serve on, and he didn't know how to write a paper, did not know how to write a research paper. And this is someone who's in a private college where I teach, and it's like, what happened? What are we doing over there? These should not be political inculcation centers. And even if you are a political inculcation center, at least teach them how to read and write and how to, put sentences and paragraphs and things together. That's why I was so impressed with our visitor from the Heritage Society, the summer intern, because her writing was clear and positive. She was a great speaker, and it's like, where are the rest of these college students today? And I would say UVA, where I taught while I was working on my doctorate in the early 2000s at the McIntire School of Business, I can tell you it was a very good experience for me, because the students were articulate and on top of things. But I know things since that was about the year 2003. I know things have declined since then on the campus because of this extreme pressure towards DEI.
Well, Dave, it's not only that, it's not only the failure to inculcate the basics into our students, like being able to write in a manner in which people can understand, put more than 2 or 3 sentences together. They don't teach history anymore. I mean, there was a history requirement when I was an undergrad. There's no history.
Sure.
A lot of people graduate having no knowledge of our own American system, of our own American history. Forget about world history. or Western civilization is now a horrible concept, to many of the people with the agenda. I mean, it's just terrible. I mean, the fact that I'm the son of an immigrant who escaped the Tsar at the turn of the last century, came over here, grew up in extreme poverty on the Lower East Side. I mean, to live in a society that has created more freedom and more wealth than any society in the history of the world is a blessing. And it's something that every student should understand. Without this country, without America, without our history, without our traditions, without our freedoms, there are tens of millions of people who would have suffered horrible existences. Hundreds of millions, probably.
Yes,
I think
hundreds of millions is very safe, and we've developed so much. And Joel, we could do this for hours, of course, but why don't we conclude with how can our audience get more information about you and about the work of the Jefferson Council?
I think they could, if they really want to know about me, they can read my book, because they'll know more than they ever need to. But that book really is a commentary on the other period in our recent history, which was somewhat similar to what is going on today. It was during the Vietnam War.
Yes.
And our society was first coming under attack, and where the norms were totally under siege. But that was a period when the world turned upside down and went 180 degrees in about 3 years. They can read my articles at the James Martin Center. Could just go online, Google James Martin Center for Academic and Renewal, and read my articles about the politicization of the college campuses and what I call the new McCarthyism at the University of Virginia. The Jefferson Council, I would say just go to our website and just Google the Jefferson Council UVA, and you will find on our website, you can join up, and right there, we publish news stories all the time. We publish stories about what's going on at UVA. You can read a lot of these stories about what's going on around academia and the campus reform and the college fix, which are broad and around the nation. But if you really want to know on a granular basis what's going on at Mr. Jefferson's University, the foundation of the American ideals, and following the truth wherever it may lead, you should be reading, sign up and read the Jefferson Council, our blogs on a regular basis. And certainly would love to have people who are interested, who want to see our founders' dreams come true at the university that they started. We are a public university. We're not an private university. We have students from all spheres, from all states. Jefferson wanted his university, although a state university, to be representative of the United States. It's a wonderful place. It's a unique institution, and I would certainly hope that those listening would support us in our efforts to really create that level playing field for the free and civil exchange of ideas, which is what a university should be about and what Mr. Jefferson dreamed of.
This session is adjourned.
Thanks for joining me for Saving America. If you have questions or comments, please find me on various social media sites. I'm Dr. David D. Schein, and I will see you next week.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.